Every organization has one priority or a small number of priorities that at least one C-level person's job hangs on. But it's very difficult for senior execs to see where projects stand with respect to those strategic priorities. Some software tools provide a dashboard where they can get a quick snapshot. To find out more, we invited an expert to speak with us, Gerald J. Leonard, Strategic PMO Advisor for government and Fortune 500 organizations. Gerald, can you tell me how important it is to track performance against priorities and how you make sure, and maybe how you make sure they align to the organization's objectives and key results overall?
Exactly. Pat, thank you again for having me on the show. So to answer that question, it is critical for C-level executives to prioritize their critical objectives and investments because it helps them to focus on delivering outcomes that align with the organization's strategic vision. One of the things that they need to consider or should consider is using an application or a framework called analytical hierarchy processing. And it allows them to use to take their business drivers, the things that they want to, where they want to go in the organization, and prioritize those, and then map their projects to those business drivers and weight them. It sounds like a very complex process, but the beauty of the analytical hierarchy process is that it's very intuitive in how it's created and built out. So you're just asking yourselves questions of, hey, is this more important than that? Where should we focus? And as the executive team goes through it, the thing that happens that's really key is that the executives get on the same page. I found in organizations, it's not so much what tool you use or what process you use, but it's getting the C-level executives speaking the same language and moving in the same direction.
Okay, thank you. Can you give some examples of some of the strategic priorities that need to be tracked across projects?
Sure. So, with, like, say, fintech organizations or the fintech sector, a key priority might be compliance with evolving regulations. In the sustainability space, I've seen organizations track their progress towards reducing Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 level emissions and those direct and indirect carbon emissions while maintaining their profitability. And then in the healthcare sector, it's really tracking patient safety initiatives across projects. And within transportation, it's about alignment on the road construction, the impact to the environment, economic development for different areas that they're putting roads in or they're maintaining roads. So the priorities are going to be different based on the sector. Mm-hmm. And so that actually allows each sector to determine what those business drivers, which goes back to the first question of how do you prioritize? It's going to be different for every sector or every organization, but it should all be based on your priorities, and every project should be aligned to where that is going so you know where to focus your attention.
Okay. So, but I think some people have trouble collecting enough information to be able to visualize where each project stands, especially at a very high level in an organization.
Sure.
Why do you think it's so hard to collect the information? I mean, I imagine you have to go get it and on where projects stand and present it in a single dashboard.
Exactly. I remember working with an international law firm, and when I came in the door, I spent the first, let's say, 90 days working with the team, analyzing, collecting all the data. And what I found is that many executives have a project list in their back pocket. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're not willing to share it because they feel like, hey, if I share this, some of the stuff I have on my list is not going to get done. And so what happens is the organization begins to bottleneck because there's only so many projects that people let through the gate and that they will finance and so on. But people still have all of these projects. So when you have projects, let's say your backlog inventory of demand from the organization that needs to get done, in people's pockets, it's really hard to see, right? So you have to, one, bring all of that out and put it in a centralized database. I've done that for years, for the last 25 plus years, for major organizations and government agencies. And what they learn, what they learn in that process is when you have all of that information in one place and you prioritize it and you create dashboards around it, it becomes critically visible where to focus the attention and where they shouldn't, but it also shows the amount of work that needs to go on, and you have to manage that against critical constrained resources. So if you don't have a process and a system that allows you to do that, it is very difficult, almost impossible to manage at that level, because the more complex things get, the more simplified your processes have to be to organize things. So you have to have really good processes around that.
Okay. Do you find that sometimes it's when projects are in different phases, for example, and that it's hard to sort of align them in terms of priorities?
Well, when projects are in different phases, again, if you put them into a single database,
Hmm.
right, and you're using, let's say, an enterprise Gantt chart, right, and think of a Gantt chart as the lines that show, the timelines, right, that gives you visibility as where things are. And here's something else that I found too, is that in these large organizations, and this was an example again in this international organization, we started having colliding deliverables. And what I mean by that is there were so many projects going on that the delivery date started kind of trying to fit into the same window. But by putting everything in that enterprise system and seeing the different timelines, and then making a milestone marker for the date of when things are going to be delivered and to whom, it became really clear that we needed to move things out or bring them back or change them so that, one, we weren't delivering too much value or too many solutions or deliverables during the same weekend or the same time. Also, we needed to be aware that we weren't inundating certain departments with too much change,
Hmm.
right? Think about it personally. If you just came home and the cable television company changed your screens and changed the whole program for your cable, you picked up your phone and you had a new interface, you log into your bank account and they changed the software, you would pull out your hair. Or for me, the little hair I do have, you just you would want to pull it out. And so we as executives have to be aware and sensitive to what the users are going through when we're rolling out all of these great capabilities.
Hmm.
And the thing with AI is AI allows us to do it faster and quicker, but people still have to consume that information. So we still have to be very sensitive, even if we're using AI, to throttle how we're laying things out so that we give the organization a chance to digest all of that change. AI and the computers have been upgraded, but we as humans are still the same.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about any experience you've had where you were able to track projects using a single dashboard and to get
Sure,
key metrics? And yeah, tell me a little bit about that to get the key metrics and strategic priorities.
sure. Again, I'll go back to this international law firm where we put everything in a portfolio system. And we were able to track across all the different departments. It was an international global environment. And we were able to get the metrics that we need as far as not just on time and on budget, but we were able to get strategic alignment metrics from the system. We were able to look at, cost versus value, right? Because if now we've been able to identify the key business drivers and measure them, and then map projects to those measurements, we can now look at cost versus value. We can look at risk over time and risk and impact. So to be able to get the kind of metrics that will allow you to drive the system, you have to do that. There's another organization, it's a very large Department of Transportation. They brought me in 2014 to help them solve a problem with over 14,000 projects on a $16 billion budget. And they had no automation in their schedules, nor did the data talk to all the other systems. Well, with 3 developers, we were able to do that. And then we started using like Power BI and some other tools to build dashboards so that now we're able to see across these 9 divisions and these 14,000 projects where were the things that we needed to focus on? Because when you're looking at that much information, it's impossible to focus. But if you can put it into a system and then put thresholds and metrics around the variations and you're systematizing and automating it, now when something sticks out, I can go focus on those, let's say 50 projects out of the 14,000 that need special attention, and I can assign a number of project managers to go focus on that, or we can highlight the top 10 or the top 5 based on cost, value, and so on. But you have to have all that data into a system. You have to have a framework and a process to be able to do that. And you have to have a methodology, and you can build that and you can automate it so that in this particular organization, the client has 3 people. They have 1,000 project managers across the state. They have 3 people that on a day-to-day basis look at the system, because the technology and the database and the processes are doing the heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then we focus on the exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Because on a regular basis, all the other stuff is happening as it should. And because of the way we've set it up, we know that if something is green, we understand what green means.
Yeah.
And the system has it synchronized and automated in a way that we understand green.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have those kind of systems like that, and someone says, "Oh, it's green," well, they're greenwashing, right? You have no idea what green means, or
Mm-hmm.
red or yellow. And so by having that, we are able to really know when something is red or yellow, we need to pay attention right then to keep it from going to red and get it back to green.
Okay, that's a huge project that you're talking. Those are what you're talking about. So, does the project portfolio manager typically help define the strategic priorities, or does he or she just get given them?
Well, I think it's not so much that one should define and the other one is and someone else is being given. I think the portfolio manager, right, the portfolio expert should sit side by side with the executives,
Mm-hmm.
because the C-level executives are going to know their strategic priorities. But how do you go about defining the prioritization of those? How do you go about mapping those inside of projects? They're not going to have that level of knowledge or experience. And even if they do, they don't have the time because of their other responsibilities of managing, whether it's the CFO, the COO, the CIO, the CAO. They don't have time to do the hands-on work. They have to think strategically and then get their team members. But by having a strategic portfolio manager or someone with that skill set, like say a chief project or portfolio manager officer in the room with them, they're able to then collaboratively do this together. And again, I think the most important piece of this is that it's not the list of projects that come out that's the most valuable. It's the fact that the executives get on the same page and they understand the direction the company is going, our organization is going, and they know which projects are most aligned that's going to help them get there. If they know that and they see the value in it, they're then going to be much more engaged in the process because they realize, hey, this is actually going to help me accomplish my overall strategic goal for my department as well as the company. So they're going to be much more engaged.
Right. Okay. So talk to me a little bit about steering committees. Steering committees for you have projects and you have portfolios. Who sits on them? Who runs them? How does that work?
Sure. Steering committees are very, very important. And usually it's the CEO or CIO, sorry. It's the CIO, like senior executives or department head. It could be also an external stakeholder. But here's something that I learned. And I work with this gentleman named Ash Banerjee, who is like he was a phenomenal CIO. He still is a executive leader in major law firms that are the global presence that I was able to learn from. And one of the things that he taught me years ago was that there's a big difference between boards and committees. And his definition that we always follow and I follow is that a board makes decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Committees provide input.
Mm-hmm.
They don't make decisions. If I'm on a committee, I can capture information. I can provide that information to a board, but then it's the board members that actually make the decision of how things are going to go. So a committee could be a group that meets, let's say it could meet weekly, monthly, or even quarterly, but a board is going to be the organization that the committee feeds its information to,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's going to feed its information to, and then they're going to, based on those strategic priorities, metrics, and all the information. So they need all of that data that we've been talking about in a very concise and color-coded format. And one other thing I realized working with folks at that level is that if I can give them a one-page chart about their portfolio that's color-coded, that highlights the top 10 initiatives, and it shows where they are from a performance standpoint, color-coded,
Mm-hmm.
and I have the data later on to back it up, if they want to drive down, that's going to help them make better decisions and quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I've been in organizations where we've tried to convince, let's say, the C-suite to do something, and we gave them a lot of text data, and they're kind of like going, "I'm not following this. I don't see this. I don't have time to dig into this like that right now with everything else going on." I took the same data, put it in a chart, color coded the chart, and then went, "Oh, I get it. I can see." It was just like, I can see okay, yes, we need to do this. This is really important, because they saw how much the little that there was green, yellow, and red on the chart, and they saw a lot more yellow and red. And I was able to explain why that was there, and where the green was, and why we needed to focus on the yellows and reds. And they approved the project to move forward, because they could cut from a color coding standpoint, they could see the impact.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we talked a little bit about how one would how a person would go about recognizing when
Yep.
there's problems with some of the projects, how C-level executives can be communicated this. But what about when you do have a situation where one or more projects is behind with respect to strategic priorities? What are some of the ways of correcting that situation?
Sure. I would say first you want to identify why. Okay. So, because there could be multiple reasons. There could be external reasons. There could be a compliancy requirement that has to be fulfilled. There could be, financials. There could be a stakeholder not providing feedback in time. There could be a number of reasons. So you want to get to the root why. And then once you understand the root why, you want to look at, again, are there resource issues? Are there scope problems, or whatever the problem is? And so once you got a good handle on that problem, my approach is, I want to bring my team together. I want to, for any boards or committees I'm on, I want to elevate that project to the team, and I want to elevate it as an issue or a risk without running anyone over with a bus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do that, then people are not going to want to talk about problems. But if you bring it up as, hey, we're here to address the problem, not the person, that exposed the problem or created the problem. We're here to solve the problem. But then you get people together, and I like getting in a room or on Zoom with a whiteboard or sticky notes, and then mapping it out, and then collectively, kind of masterminding the solution.
Right.
And then again, taking that solution, putting it into a schedule where I can see a Gantt chart and go, okay, when do we need to get this back on schedule? What can we do in parallel? What can we fast track? How can we create some buffers so that if something slips at an integration point, that we're able to recover? And I get everyone in the room to agree on it. And then we start having daily stand-ups, 15-minute daily stand-ups. And it's people get on the call, they stand up, they don't sit down, and you go around the room. This is what we got to do today to move this forward, to get this project caught up. How's it going? Tell me what you're doing, what's working, what's not working, what issues do you have? You get people to do that on a major issue. One, they will feel accountable to the team, not
Mm-hmm.
to you as the leader. They will feel accountable to the team, and it will create visibility, and you got buy-in, because the solution that you came up with to get this project back on scope, it has to be a solution that the team creates. Because if you can get the team to create the solution, then you're going to have buy-in for the team solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to do it by yourself, you're not going to get buy-in, and you're going to have a very difficult time.
Good point. Good point. Now, we all know that as companies go along, they've got hundreds, thousands of projects, and then they start out with a set of priorities, and then priorities change. This happens
Sure.
to people in life, and it happens to companies. What are some of the good ways of dealing with that when priorities change from the project portfolio management perspective? Do you see this happen, and is it a big problem for PPMs? How do they deal with it?
Well, think about this. Think about COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, COVID was a massive global change for everyone in the world. There was not one person in the world that wasn't impacted. There was not one company in the world that wasn't impacted. There was not one portfolio in the world that wasn't impacted. Some companies who had a well-structured portfolio and had flexibility were able to accommodate those changes. The other ones are no longer in business. That's how important this is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The
Okay.
other companies that did not have a flexible portfolio, they did not know where things were. They hadn't created a rehearsal of how do we deal with change in the market when things happen? How do we prioritize our portfolio? Think of it as one of the best examples I've ever heard or seen is when you're flying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is taking off on a flight. You have the tower, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the tower of folks who are kind of directing traffic controllers, right?
Right.
And in an instant, in a second, things can happen in the air, or a flight can be coming in, and they go, wait a minute, there's a problem. We got another flight coming in. We got to avert this. We got to change. They have to be very dynamic and fluid, but they have to have a framework and a process. Otherwise, it will be chaotic, and there'll be a lot more accidents than there are, or that we've ever experienced. It's the same process. We have to have a flexible process that everyone understands and can accommodate, so that when those things happen, because they will happen, we can be one of the companies that evolve and
Mm-hmm.
transform more than one that is now in bankruptcy and is no more.
Right. Okay. Good examples. So we've been assuming that it's good to have a small number of strategic priorities, but should a portfolio be composed of projects that meet only a few strategic priorities, or is it better to have a mix? Can you discuss the pros and the cons of one versus the other?
Sure. So, I've studied with a lady named Dee Jacob, who studied with Elliot Goldratt, who wrote the book The Goal, and the concept was the theory of constraints. So I got certified in the theory of constraints at a portfolio level. And so having a few critical projects is like, the kids trying to get on the bus in the morning going to school with big backpacks on. You got to put them in line, and you got to kind of slowly get them onto the bus. If they all rush to the bus at one time, they're never going to get on. They bottleneck, and then nobody gets to school. So it's kind of that thing where you have to have a set of critical projects, and you have to streamline that process. At the same time, you have to have a holistic approach to how you run your business. And I think one of the best models for doing that is the Gardner portfolio mix model. And what that means is that, one, a part of your portfolio should be dedicated to projects that are called run the business projects, keeping the lights on, upgrading the servers, tweaking the processes, making sure things are, maintaining the cars, getting the oil changed, those kinds of things, just keeping it running. Then there's the grow the business projects. Hey, these are projects where we're looking to reduce the expenses or increase revenue. So I'm actually growing the business profitably by doing one of those two things: reducing the expenses, increasing the profits. And then 15 to 20% of your portfolio should be transform the business project. What's the next iPhone in our business?
Mm-hmm.
What is the next solution that is going to greatly transform how we work? If you focus, you can actually do both of these things at the same time. You focus on your critically top priorities by streamlining them and having them get on the bus in line, but while at the same time thinking holistically about the entire organization. Growing the business, running the business, and transforming the business. Running the business should be about 65% of your portfolio. Growing the business should be about 35%. And then 10 to 15 or 20% should be transforming the business. And if you do that, you'll be able to capture all of those things and then still move your business forward.
No, excellent points. So How effectively can you measure progress against priorities and objectives using an agile approach only? Is it more effective? Can you do agile, or is it more effective to use a more traditional approach when it comes to measuring strategic priorities?
Well, so the idea of agile and waterfall, that's down at the project scheduling level. So with inside of a portfolio, you have the portfolio level, and then
Mhm.
underneath that, you have programs, which is multiple projects that are all providing the same benefit. So they all have to be done together. And then each project. And at the project level, we can have agile and we can have a waterfall, like a traditional framework for managing projects. At the portfolio, there is a scaled agile or scaled portfolio model where you're looking at, hey, how do we streamline the process, but you're still considering the overall concepts, right, of portfolio management. And the way I get people to think about portfolio management is that in your personal budget at home, you practice portfolio management every month
Mhm.
because you have a certain amount of money that comes in. And then you get with your spouse or your significant other and you say, hey, what do we want to do this month with this bucket of money that we brought in? We got bills we got to pay. We have some things that we might want to add to the house to, make the house more efficient, or we want to decorate, or we want to bring in a new couch or something. Hey, do we want to go on that nice trip? That's going to transform our relationship. So every month, we as human beings, we practice portfolio management. And again, we can take an agile approach to it and be very flexible and fluid, or we can kind of take a traditional approach and say, here's our budget. Now let's see where, once we take care of the main things that, what do we have left over to do all the other things we want to. So I would say, from a scaled agile standpoint, agile can play a big part in the portfolio, but the principles that I just talked about around portfolio management, and then I've also written in my book, A Symphony of Choices, where I teach these principles through a story, are all required as well.
Okay. Yeah. So Gerald, you and I have talked a little bit, and I do know you're a musician. And
Yes,
one, I can't help but notice, I think you got an upright bass back there.
I got a couple of them. I got a upright. I got a big upright. I got an electric upright back behind me, and I got another one on the wall there. And I
Right.
got a few electric basses around me here. In fact, I have an EP coming out of 4 Beatles songs, and I'm preparing to record an album next year with my producer up in Philly.
Excellent. And so I know you're an accomplished jazz musician, and I know that you've written books, and I'd like you to say something about your symphony of choice and maybe relate it to the music. And if you could relate it to PPM and music.
Sure. Well,
Question.
here's the cover.
Yep.
It's called The Symphony of Choices: How a Manager Taught how mentorship taught a manager decision making, which is portfolio management, project management, and workplace engagement. It takes place in the environment of a symphony orchestra where a symphony bassist becomes the orchestra manager. So he has to plan and run the orchestra organization as a regular organization. And so he remembered that when he was taking in college that he had this business class. So he reaches out to an old professor, Professor Richardson, and Professor Richardson, in exchange for some concert tickets, starts meeting with him on a weekly basis and begins to teach him the principles of project portfolio management, which is actually a course that I wrote for myself to take, where I got the PFMP, or the Project Portfolio Management Certification from PMI. So leveraging that material, he's basically teaching Jerry Hall these principles, and he transforms the orchestra using these principles and saves a concert season, because there's a lot of interesting things that happen. And if you want an analogy of what the book is like, it's like Ted Lasso for soccer, or Ted Lasso for portfolio management.
Okay. And Jerry Hall is not the Jerry Hall we might know from Mick Jagger.
No, not the Jerry Hall from Mick Jagger. It's Jerry Hall, the classical bassist who becomes the orchestra manager. So
Okay.
they're both musicians, but not in the same vein.
No, no, no. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, Gerald. So thank you so much. This is very useful. And I look forward to talking with you again.
Excellent, excellent.
Okay. And thank you for joining us.